Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the inventor of the DrawSuccess training program, has authored or co-authored multiple fiction and nonfiction books, and has also written screenplays and songs. Her name is Brownell Landrum, and my interview with Brownell will follow the note-taking sounds. Brownell Landrum, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Your personal motto is, I aspire to inspire. Why do you aspire to inspire?
Well, why wouldn't I? I mean, I think that that's kind of the whole purpose of, life in general, but certainly any kind of creative endeavor, is to try to, find some way to get people to think or to feel, and that's inspiration. So, if I can spark any kind of new thought or new feeling or new revelation or something, then I feel like I've done my job as a writer.
I'm going to ask quite a few questions about your writing work in a moment, but before I do so, I'm going to ask you a question about a training program you invented and patented, and that is the DrawSuccess training program. How does that program work, and what type of people is it for?
It's actually centered around a game that I invented. An actual physical board game, which people think, wait a minute, do people play board games anymore? But they do. And we did it in all kinds of different environments. I mean, I did it played with couples and relationships, but primarily it was used in corporate environments to help people work better together.
Now, you've written quite a few books, but your most recent book that you've written is a novel titled The Hero's Playbook. Without spoiling too much about The Hero's Playbook, what is it about?
Well, it's actually not a novel. It's actually a playbook. It follows the hero's journey, and it's got all kinds of activities and exercises and ways to get introspection. So it's an interactive kind of, some people would call it a journal, except it's not just a bunch of lines and questions. It is lots of different kinds of activities. So it was inspired by the Joseph Campbell, A Hero with a Thousand Faces, the classic hero's journey, and Christopher Vogler's take on that for writing. And so I just thought that I would be really fun, and I had so much fun doing it, to kind of take people through that process. And whether it's for self-reflection or whether it's for writers to help them kind of develop their stories, or whether it's for psychologists to use. In fact, I found a great article just today about how there's some very solid research about using the hero's journey with psychology and with clients and patients in psychology. So it can be used in all different kinds of environments, whether it's corporate leadership, or taking through an organization for creativity. It goes through all those 12 steps that Christopher Vogler sets up in the hero's journey, everything from the ordinary world all the way to what they call return with the elixir. And I'm currently working on a mentor's manual to help teach people how to teach people to go through it. So it's really, really fun. And it's one of those kinds of things that you can look at and it's super, kind of basic. And then you can keep looking at it and it goes deeper, and then it goes deeper. So it really goes into things like Enneagrams. It goes into looking at stakes, heroes versus villains, values, archetypes, all kinds of different stuff.
I apologize for the error in my interview notes, and thank you for explaining what the Hero's Playbook actually is.
No problem. No problem. It's new, so you didn't get much time to prep for it, so okay. It's totally fine.
You've also written the We Meet Again trilogy, the DUET Stories tetralogy, that's a series of 4 books, and the End, a Love Story to the Universe series. Without spoiling too much of those series, what are each of those series about?
Well, okay, so We Meet Again just came out last year, and it's already getting some really, really good feedback. And that is this kind of epic reincarnation mystery about a famous couple from history who are reincarnated today to fulfill a prophecy that'll change the world. So, with that one, it is about this couple, and it starts out in present day, and then it goes back to their past lives, and you start seeing how they were trying to fulfill this mission the whole time. And like I said, it goes back to a famous couple from history, and it comes back to 5 different lifetimes. So it was just really, really fun to write. And I've written the DUET Stories, as you said, a tetralogy is book of four. Those were also written about more of a classic love story than a mystery, but looking at a couple and looking at who they were in prior lifetimes and how it affects them today. So those are kind of similar in that they're kind of like this time travel love story, but the time travel isn't sci-fi. The time travel, unless you consider reincarnation sci-fi, I guess. So that's what those are about. And then the end series, it's short stories, and that's really, really different. It is basically the most autobiographical I've ever gotten. And I was writing the story, and as I'm writing the story, I'm thinking I'm going to write this story from what I call the point of view of the upstairs. So people can imagine what that means. And it's about this group of guides and angels who are trying to get this couple together. And they are funny and they are deep. And so we're following this, and like I said, it's semi-autobiographical. So I wrote the first story, and it was called The End, A Love Story to the Universe. And then I got inspired to write part two. And then just last week, I wrote part three. So for anybody listening to this, those stories are free. Please take advantage of that, because I just want people to read them, and people are really enjoying them. They're fun, they're different, they're kind of a magical realism, and they're heartfelt.
You've written a nonfiction book titled 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, and you've co-authored another nonfiction book titled 50 Shades Deeper. Without spoiling too much of those two nonfiction books, what are each of them about, and who did you co-author 50 Shades Deeper with?
Yeah, I'll start with the 50 Shades Deeper book. I started a Facebook group when the 50 Shades phenomena was very big. And the purpose of the group and the name of the group was called 50 Shades Deeper. And really what we did was go into the stories of the 50 Shades stories, the E.L. James or Erica, her stories, and really look at the deeper messages in there, because a lot of people just see them kind of on the surface level, but we really got into some very, very deep discussions. And they were so interesting. And actually, Erica joined our group, and she's also quoted. So she is one of the co-authors of the book. But it's kind of basically sharing our discussions and our deep answers to the questions from the group. So it was co-written by 150 people around the world who were fans, who saw more in those stories than just the surface value. So that was really fun. And then you asked about my first book, which was nonfiction, which is called 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen. And that was inspired by a very, very difficult time for me. And I was going through a really, really difficult period. I had a business fail. My dog died. I had a relationship end. My house was being foreclosed. I lost all my money. I mean, everything fell apart at once. And I just kept trying to get some meaning from that. Like, this has to be happening for a reason. What's the reason? So I like to joke to people and say, when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason, I could say, yeah, I wrote the book on it, literally wrote the book on it.
What motivates you to write, and what drives your interest in metaphysical mysteries?
What motivates me to write is that I guess there's a lot of reasons, as I mentioned, as far as, aspiring to inspire, but there is such an energy to the writing process. Like, you feel like you're tapping into something. I know Stephen King even talks about this energy you're tapping into, and Liz Gilbert. And so you're just kind of like in this place where you're receiving inspiration, receiving energy, and it's just the best feeling in the world. to be able to kind of take these ideas and put them into stories and then hopefully share them with the world and have people enjoy them. I mean, I've had fans tell me that my books saved their life, which is just the most astounding thing. So that's why, and I love to get into the metaphysical stuff. As I mentioned, my novels, the We Meet Again and the Duet Stories, get into reincarnation, and I just think that's super fun storytelling. I mean, I just think from a storyteller point of view, you can imagine, if you read a romance, for example, and you meet the couple, and of course the whole point of a romance story usually is they meet and then they fall in love and then something happens, and do they get back together or not? And then once they're together, it's kind of usually the end of the story, right? The happily ever after. But when you've got reincarnation, as I say in the quote in my story, The End, is the end ever really the end if it's a reincarnation story, right? You can kind of keep reintroducing those characters again and again and again, but in a different time, a different place, different bodies, different friends, different struggles, that kind of thing. So that's why, one of the reasons I like writing about reincarnation. And I also love the metaphysical mysteries because that's tied to obviously reincarnation, but it also starts making sense in our lives. And I've had people that would never believe in reincarnation. And, you don't have to believe in time travel to enjoy Back to the Future, but it does open up people's minds thinking, well, what is the reason this might be happening? And could it be tied to a past life? So I think those are just really fun to write about.
Are there any differences between how you approach writing fiction and how you approach writing nonfiction?
I think they're very different. And I would say that there's probably three categories of different, and that there's, nonfiction, and then there's fiction, and then this playbook was kind of a whole different kind of creative process. The nonfiction is much more left brain. It's much more linear. It came from a meditative place when I was like, why are these things happening to me? And then it was like, these are the 5 reasons. And then I could research it, and I could look at data, and I could look what other people talked about, and I could pull in case studies, and I could pull in other examples. So it was a much more methodical process. Kind of a, okay, this what's in this chapter? What do I put there? What's in that chapter? Fiction is, yes, you want to organize, and if you're going to write a mystery, you have to organize it, and you have to put together the details on it. So, it is planning, but it is a whole different right brain creative, like, where should this go and how should this tie together? And, what's the message in this and what's the theme here? So it's really, really different. And then the third thing is the hero's playbook. And for that, it was kind of like almost like artwork, because there were so many activities that required drawing and like different sketching and imagery, and so it was like creating kind of it wasn't a coloring book, but it was kind of like that in terms of like, what's the image here? What's the message here? So it wasn't just text and lines. It has all kinds of graphs and charts, and some of the pages are upside down and all that kind of stuff. So that was a totally different kind of creative process.
Are all of your books independently, traditionally, or hybrid published, or did you use different publishing methods for your books?
The first book, The 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, I originally published it hybrid. I used a publisher my father had used, and I didn't know anything about publishing at the time, so I went through them. I have since taken it back from that hybrid publisher and did self-publishing on it. But my first go at it, if you will, was hybrid. And all of my other books have been self-published. For a variety of reasons. One is, of course, it's just really hard to get traditionally published. But also with We Meet Again, I wanted to launch the trilogy as a trilogy. I didn't want readers to have to wait a year or another year. And I didn't want to have to wait how many years to get it out there. I wanted to get it out there as soon as I could. Now, might it get picked up by traditional publishers? It might, and that might be really great. And with the Heroes Playbook, honestly, the way I'm marketing it, it's more profitable for me to stay self-published. I don't really have a desire to go to traditional publish on that.
You've written several screenplays and treatments for feature films, short films, and television programs. What are some of your works as a screenwriter? And as I think this is only like the second or third time I've actually heard the word treatment used in this context. What is a treatment for a film or television program?
Okay, so I'll answer the treatment question and then I'll come back to the first part of your question, which is what have I written in that regard? Treatments can vary. First of all, there's a difference between a treatment for a film versus a television series. With a television series, of course, that can change depending on whether it's going to be 3 episodes of something, on Netflix, or is it going to be 25 or 20 episodes a year on a network show. So that's kind of different, but that sets up the framework of where the show is going. And I did pitch a television series called Past Life Tour Guides that I did the whole treatment. And I mean, it went through who are the characters, how do they interact, what's their backstory, where's the story going to take them, very, very detailed in terms of, I even outlined, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I outlined hundreds of possible episodes for that show. I mean, it could have gone for years and years and years, or it could still, if it gets picked up, do that. So that's what you think about when you're thinking about television, is you're thinking, hey, in fact, I have the original script for the first Grey's Anatomy show. It's like, okay, what's the structure for the show? Who are the main characters? Where is it going to go in the first season? Where could it go in the second season? That kind of thing. And for that one, I actually wrote 6 episodes. So I really wanted to lay it out saying, here's the variety of kinds of shows that it can be done within this framework. Treatment for a movie, it can depend on, like, if you're James Cameron, it could be 100 pages. I mean, his treatments go on and on and on, and he gets really, really specific. Other people's treatments might be 2 pages or 10 pages. Here's the basic story. Here's where it could be filmed. Here's some sets and scenes. But mostly in film, a lot of it's left up to the director and the cinematographer and some of those other people that are involved, obviously actors, to kind of take what's in the screenplay and go from there. Also, with me, when I write a book, I usually write the screenplay. Sometimes I'll write the screenplay first and then write the book. Sometimes it'll be the other way around. And like with my We Meet Again series, it started out as a screenplay for a TV series. And then I adapted it to a book. And then I went back and it was a lot of back and forth. And now the books, if you read the books, you'll see each chapter is basically an episode of television. And so honestly, for that, the book will serve as the treatment because it gives you everything you need and more for the show. So it's kind of like you can kind of cheat because you've already written the treatment they have everything they need. And of course, I'm hoping to get that optioned, and then I'm hoping to actually be able to write the scripts because I laid it out so that it would be easy to do. So it can vary. It can vary as far as treatments go. As far as the things that I've written, I've had a number of my stories performed, but not on film. I've had them performed audio. So I've had acting groups. There's a really incredible group on Facebook called Voices on Paper, and they'll act out your scripts and give you feedback. Some of them I've recorded and put them on a podcast. So they're productions, they're just not video. A lot easier, obviously, and cheaper to do just the audio recordings. And I've written television. As I said, I pitched to a big studio the Past Life Tour Guides show. I'd like to see We Meet Again as a show. I'd love to see The End, my little, as a part show, or half-hour episodes or whatever they end up being, because those are kind of short stories broken out. I've written a couple of musicals. I wrote an animated musical. I wrote another musical that's kind of like the life. Look, It's a Wonderful Life meets The Big Chill. Kind of this crazy musical. And I've written, dramas. I've written comedies. I've kind of done all the above. And I've also got a song that I co-wrote with my brother that was in a small film in 2015, and then in 2020, right when COVID hit, it got really, really big and like got 500,000 views in like 2 weeks or something. It was really, really crazy. So I've done a little bit of all of that stuff.
You've also written and co-written songs. What are some songs you've written or co-written as a songwriter?
Yeah, well, one of them is the one I just mentioned, which is it's in that film. The film is called Almost Home, and the song is called While You Can. And actually, that song had a different intent when it was conceived. My brother and I wrote it for my father's memorial, and when my father passed away, and he was scoring. My brother's a composer and obviously songwriter too, and he was scoring the film, and he's like, "Can we use this for the closing credits?" I said, "Yeah, that would be fabulous." So that is that song. And there are a few other songs. There's one I wrote at the end of last year. Again, I co-wrote it with my brother on that one as well. I wrote the lyrics, he writes the music usually, and it's called Christmas is Forgiveness. So that's kind of like, if I have a magic wand, and would love to see that get performed on some Christmas albums maybe next year. And then there are a couple of songs that I've written the lyrics and the music myself, but I'm not pretending to be a musician. But it was fun tackling that aspect of it too, writing the music and the lyrics.
One final question. You're the executive producer of the Life is a Trip podcast. Now, I don't know if you host that as well or not, but what can listeners expect from a typical episode of the podcast you produce?
Yeah, it's not an interview show. It is, if you know the Modern Love podcast, some people know that. That's a New York Times. And basically, it's just stories that are recorded that you can go listen to. So with ours, The Life is a Trip, it's mostly reincarnation, metaphysical, afterlife stories. Some of them are comedic. Some of them are very deep. Some of them are sad. Some of them are hopeful. And there are different writers just all over the world that have contributed those stories, and then we get them performed or recorded, and then we put them up there. So if there's anybody listening that writes stories in that kind of tone, a lot of them are reincarnation, but not all of them. And to be clear, they can be fictional or factual. So they don't have to be, proven or anything like that. And so we record them and we put them up on the podcast. And we also are on IMDb, which is pretty exciting. If a writer wants to get IMDb credit, then they can submit a story for us. And if it works, then they get to be on IMDb.
Brownell, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an awesome guest to interview.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I really enjoyed it.
It was wonderful to interview Brownell, and as always, I'll include relevant links in the text description of this episode. It's always amazing to interview multi-talented authors like Brownell. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.